Welcome everybody. This is the third talk that we're doing today with the title Liquid Experience. It's a part of our Wellbeing Culture Forum that we started in the wake of COVID-19. It was in March. We did it only online. Now it's a premiere for the second consecutive day here at St. Agnes, the home of the gallery of Johann König that we are partnering with. We are doing these talks in both the physical reality and the virtual reality that we are all so used to looking at Zoom screens and in Zoom conferences. And now it's an experiment. The first time, as Hans already said yesterday, we are basically merging these both realities, and we have here the panelists in this beautiful courtyard under the blue sky of Berlin, and also under this tree that is already connecting to Hannes. Hannes is on the place where the tree is reaching out with the leaves, and the wind will blow it permanently into your ears, so you will be able to observe Hannes, how he is all the time interacting with the tree. And the tree actually was also a very important part of our discussion yesterday, because yesterday we discussed about from breaking Bauhaus to growing Gaia. So as you may know, our company is now a leading investor and operator of well-being facilities worldwide. We are building thermal baths, and the thermal art program we founded in 2017 in the Royal Institution in London to open up the architectural debate towards art and to see how we can create cities that are more sustainable, more inclusive, and also more just. And through COVID-19, this topic that we started 2017 became extremely relevant, because the virus actually taught us that we are all interconnected on a molecular level, and that this molecular level can decide about life and death. So the way how we design our cities is also responsible not only for how we design our populations and our populations' interactions, but also if we are healthy or not. It also showed us that that we are all in one boat, and it doesn't matter actually. I mean, it matters a lot. COVID showed how unjust the effects of such lockdowns can be for different groups, but at the end we are all one population, and the health of this population affects all of us. So this kind of very existential experience of connectivity on the one hand, and social lockdowns and distancing on the other hand, is the moment where we are right now. A city that is recreated is a city that provides not only the spaces that we know from the city. And this is interesting, because when we look at a city, the city actually is constructed out of very similar functions. You have the function of sleeping, the function of education, the function of the marketplace and shopping, and then you have all the transport routes in between. This is a city how we know it since 150 years, since the Manchester capitalism created giant conglomerates of humans living together in a very efficient way. But back then it was the topic of our talk yesterday, Bauhaus, that saw the need of a revolution of design and coordinated action actually of culture to recreate these cities, and this was a response. It was obviously a response to a situation of crisis. What was exactly the title of our talk before this one, Creating in Crisis. So the crisis produced a situation of innovation, and we believe that we are exactly in this situation right now. So as 1917 we had the Spanish flu, we have now COVID, we have social and racial unrest in the United States, but also all over the world. And we are questioning in this COVID situation the way how we created our lives and our environments. And liquid experience is now a content where we talk about a content where a city can be built not on transactions where we buy and sell stuff, but on the creation of experience that can maybe help to create a more healthy, more reliant, anti-fragile, also mentally healthy society. And this is something that we want to discuss today with our panelists. I'm super grateful that you are here. I will now introduce some of them, and then I will Heiko, my friend and co-moderator of this panel, that will introduce the other panelists. So starting here with Jakob Kutz-Stensen. Jakob is not only an amazing artist that is exploring exactly the field of the liquid experience, but he's also the first person that I ever met in the virtual reality, because he invited me to go into this room where you can meet with VR glasses on your head, and then you are suddenly an avatar that is meeting another avatar, and you can interact and you can play together. And this was a very groundbreaking experience for me, showing a little bit the future of our worlds, how it could look like. Another artwork that I want to relate to is the Deep Listener that Jakob did for the Serpentine's augmented architecture program that we will also talk about. And I'm very curious to hear about your plans, your future plans on this talk. Thank you very much for being here. Then I want to introduce to you Takashi Kudo. Takashi is a very good friend since we met 2 years ago in Tokyo. And he participated already in many of our Wellbeing culture talks. And we are working with each other on a weekly level, exploring the future of cities and the creation of spaces and the content of the spaces and the experiences. He's one of the co-creators and thinkers of Team Lab, the art collective from Japan that not only recreated the way how we actually experience art, but also created an extremely successful model for this experience spaces. And this was possible because of, among others, Molly Dent-Brocklehurst, that is on the next screen. And I'm very happy that you are here, Molly. Last time we were together on a podium, I think it was in 2018 during Design Miami. This was also about the creation of cities around the human body and how art can help us to translate the needs of nature and body for this. And Molly is the president of the new launched initiative of PACE called Superblue, that is actually providing this platform and these resources for artists to create bigger experiences. I'm extremely happy, Molly, that you are there. And then I'm introducing Hannes from Random International. This is one of the experiences that blow away my mind that he created in Sharjah. It's a rain room where you go inside and it's raining. Outside it's very hot, inside it's raining. And when you are in this rain, the raindrops are not falling on you, because you can basically walk through the rain like Jesus walked on water without getting wet. And this kind of experiences are also showing us, it's like looking into the possibilities of the future when we create our environment. And then Heiko Michels, he's a theater maker in Berlin and one of the closest collaborators for the curatorial part of our Therme art program, and co-moderating this forum with me. And he will now introduce to you the other panelists.
Hi. Yeah, we have on the stage left Sabine Hemelsbach, who came from Basel today or yesterday. I don't know. No, yesterday you came. From the House of Electronic Arts in Basel, where she's working with interrelationships between technique, art, and body, and also nature. So interrelationships and with this experience we have there. She was before at the ZKM, Zentrum für Medienkünste, cultural, also co-curating, and she's media theorist and she is curator, so it's interesting to have the side of reflection and the side of action, so because this is for me an interesting part in this question of liquid experiences. And behind me we have Sean Diani, I see you here behind me, from Meow Wolf in New Mexico. And they are creating really special art places, immersive spaces. I think you started with working with trash, but now the things I saw from you, it's really, you have to tell us a bit more later about your works. Yes.
Finally.
Thank you very much. Big applause for the panelists, please. So, to start with the first question, Molly, when it started? Yes,
Throw me in there. Hi, everybody, and so nice to see you, Nikolai. I'm so sorry I'm not there. And Hannes, I see that I'm sitting right behind you, and I could actually strangle you. No, I'm not going to.
It will make a very
the project that I've been working on started, oh gosh, it's difficult to say really, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I'm going to, it dips much further back into the career of James Turrell, which Pace has been very involved in, and I was very involved in when I worked for Pace. And even before that, I organized his first major exhibition in Moscow when I was working for the Garage. So kind of for me, it's gone back that far, for Pace even further. But really, it kind of started to coming together when Pace did the exhibition of Team Lab in Palo Alto. And I traveled there that year. I saw that, and I also saw Leo Villarreal's incredible Baylight Bridge. And then I traveled out to Los Angeles and saw the Rain Room for the first time for myself. And at that moment, we were putting together a project, working a lot around commissioning art out.
Oh, Molly's iPad.
And we gathered together. We started to gather together a group of artists who we felt were really breaking boundaries in terms of how they engaged with their audience and how they created these incredible experiences rather than their objects, and started to think about how we could work together to really find a way to support those artists in a way that was much stronger than the traditional gallery model, which is obviously focused around very short exhibitions, objects and art fairs. So we, of course, looked at the incredible model that Team Lab had put together in Tokyo and started to think about how we could create our own exhibition spaces and create a model where we would produce and exhibit artworks for our artists and sell tickets and divide the ticket sales with the artists. We were sort of ready to go back in March this year, but of course then the COVID came along, and even as excited as we were, and even as how much we believed in this project, we felt that making this announcement about big gatherings coming together was somewhat complicated. So we waited until the beginning of August and have launched the company, although obviously the work behind the scenes has been going on for much longer than that.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it was Michaela de Pudy that brought us together, and it's interesting because she was for half a year telling me about Team Lab, you have to meet Team Lab, you have to see Team Lab, and I couldn't understand what she was talking about. She tried to describe it to me, this Team Lab thing, but I was like, okay, that sounds like totally crazy and I don't really understand it. So, and if we hear something that we cannot see and we cannot experience, then it's quite interesting because we don't like it. Yeah, because first it's like, what I don't understand, it seems to be like really strange. So then I remember after we met and I saw the first works, I was already like blown away by the little screens that I saw at your place, Molly. But then we went to Tokyo. And in Tokyo, we were invited to have a dinner at lunchtime because the restaurant was completely booked out for the next years. So you could have this dinner experience only at lunchtime. And this is where I met Takashi Kudo, and I ate a soup with a fish swimming in the soup. Mm-hmm. And every time I moved the soup, the fish was also still in the soup, but the moment I put the spoon in it, the fish exploded completely, but exploded over all the walls and the ceilings of the soup. And this was really immersive. And this was basically the Team Lab restaurant the Team Lab created as a small intervention, as a small immersive space. The other spaces are much, much bigger. And this was my first, this was my first relationship to the possibilities of augmentation of our reality. Takashi, this is basically one of your artist collective projects. Maybe you can tell us something about how such a collective, because this is necessary. It's necessary to collaborate. It's not possible to have the one artist that is doing the one painting that is sold then for, after he dies, always for 50 million. No, it's something that it's not about the art market, it's about the experience, not about transaction, it's about a collaboration that is recreating the world. Can you tell us something about this part of your work?
Wow. It's possible, as you said, it's, it is super hard to explain it in what we are doing. It's our work. And Mikurai, try to explain about our works in the restaurants. Even me, I felt it's very weird. So I think everybody think it's quite weird. But anyway, what we are doing, the art collectivity with Team Labs, it's around 600 members, and we have to be on the collectives. It's where we are a group of specialists. It's software engineers and hardware engineers and mathematicians and it's architect, and we try to create something together. We showed this is 500,000 square meters. It's a super huge gardens, and we try to make them transform to it's museums. So an exhibition, you walk 2-3 hours, and now it's opened in summers to 9th of November or something. And now it's a little bit too hot, I think, but it's after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it is quite nice to be there. So anyway, what I wanted to say is, in the collectives is we are groups, and we try to create something. We have aims to explain something. Always we have interested, a new relationship between human and world, including with the other peoples. That is, our motivations, and it's a research, and it's explain something of art, by art. But when we try to explain some things, we need always tools and its materials, and we are using of these digital technologies as just tools and its materials, because it's most of the times our work is softwares, and people cannot see our work. If you are programmers, engineers, maybe you can see it's in our work, through it's in our codings. But when we try to make some things, we need hardware, the projector or monitors, LEDs, or it's some robotics, or it's some other things. It's for us, it's even natures, or it's in the cities, and everywhere is a canvas. And we try to make the people to be inside with it, our work. And that is what we want. And it's when we create some things, it's each systems it's quite deeper and deeper in this even 10 years. Nobody can take care of this and everything. So we need to make it tubes. If I compare with it's a fine art, we need to make it a paint itself, and we need to make canvas and easels and everything by ourselves. So we have to create this by teams. And this 20 years, we try to stock of this our core intelligence And that is, I guess, maybe unique point of this team labs, because it's where I'm also it's independent persons, but in the same time, I'm just one part of this in the team labs. And it's our output is, like we made it, but it's not finalized until visitors going to be one part of that. And I think that can be like one of the answer for this, what Mikurai said. And it's most biggest things of this digital technology is it's changing. It's before everything was fixed, but it's now we can change, and we can bring the people to be in that change. So like we believed maybe in future or whatever's that what we want is there is no goals unless we don't have any answers, but it's like people want to be one part of that, and it's of the project, and it's going to be like a journey for our feelings. That is what we want to make, and I think it's co-creations, and it's what is a collective meanings for us at least. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Takashi. Sabine Hemelsbach, you're director of the House of Electronic Arts in Basel, and you were before at the ZKM. So you were witnessing the incredible impact technology had on the arts sector and the cultural sector. Listening to Takashi and having in mind what TeamLab has created, just as an example, but also you worked with Ryoichi Ikeda, for example, that is dealing with big data and visualizing it. How you see the potential of this kind of experience also being part of the production process and the process of reorganization of our society?
Yeah. So is it working already?
Yes, yeah, it's working.
Okay.
You
So we are at HEC, House of Electronic Arts. We look at art that is using media technologies in its production or works that are reflecting the impact of these technologies on society at large. And I don't know, I have some slides. Maybe I can focus on two projects, and I think the first one by Rafael Lozano Hemmer, who is actually also part of Superblue now, which is very nice, is where it's an interactive work. It was an amazing project that we could do in a Roman theater, 2,000 years old, very close to Basel, in Augusta Raurica. And you have to imagine, art to be installed there was not easy because there are restrictions. We could not drill anything into it and so on. And for me, this piece was about the participation of the audience in a meaningful way, because it was about politics as well. It was a critique. Who is allowed to speak? And it was done in cooperation with the canton Baselland, who wanted to announce its new cultural manifesto. And they invited people to speak up what culture means for them. But of course, this project by Raphael allows many people to do what they want. So people said something about the importance of culture, but then we also had voices. People were speaking up, giving how do you say, Liebeserklärung, a love letter to someone. So it was really amazing. And it was randomly stored. So when you spoke your message into the piece, you had reverberations of other people reacting back to you. And I think that is the key to what Raphael is doing, for example. And then another example that I would like to highlight, they are quite diverse. Well, maybe this one as well, briefly. That was a project called Pulse Room, where it is also about the personal message that someone leaves. You could leave your heartbeat into one of these 128 light bulbs that were installed outside of the building. But the current piece, that is the next one that I would like to highlight, by Lucy McRae, that we have just recently commissioned for our show Real Feelings, Emotions and Technology. that's a piece that really has changed its meaning during COVID. Lucy McRae is a British-Australian designer and artist, and she started out with her project on reflecting our need for touch, or that we have a touch deficit because we are interacting so much with the technology, so much, with our technical gadgets, and not so much with other people. So that was the original idea, but we commissioned that piece 1.5 years ago, and now in the final steps of production, it really had turned, because the title is now Solitary Survival Raft. And you see here Lucy getting into it. When it is an inflated, it's really like a tent that holds you, and then when you deflate it, you get really sucked, the cloth and the material gets really sucked onto your body, and it really makes you feel held by something. So, of course, for her now, it's really something that I find it a very good example of also an immersive experience that helps us to understand or deal with the current situation. And another example, which is also completely different, and I have no image of that, but when you mentioned the tree that we are sitting under, I thought it's nice to mention it because it's also an auditive piece, and by Markus Meder, and that's something very special also for media art, that artists often work in groups. We have heard it. They also work with scientists, and this is a piece that he has made on the Pfün forest, which is a forest in Ticino, in the Valais, in Switzerland, and it's a forest that is slowly dying because of climate change and because it's getting hotter and hotter there. And so what Markus did, he had a beautiful installation where we could see images of the forest, and then when you put on headphones, he had measured the water flow within the tree trunks with the scientific help of researchers and so on, and you could really listen to these trees crying because they were in need of water. And I have to say that was part of an exhibition that we did titled Eco-Visionaries. So it was also a show that tried to showcase works that have, give us ideas of a potential future, how to get out of that mess. But of course, we also had works like this one that were more about the status quo and showing us what's happening. And I saw so many people who was so moved by that piece, by that experience.
Yeah, it's super interesting because it shows us how technology can reconnect us to nature, because it's now complex enough to mirror it. Before, technology, it seems to me, was only able to destroy nature, but now it's able to connect to it. There's many pieces now that are in an extremely impressive way, as the ones that you described, doing exactly this kind of translation ability. So
Yeah, so I guess the point that I wanted to make is that immersive art can be critical, can be showcasing something of a societal level, and it can be meaningful in a way that the audience, the viewer, becomes an active part of it.
Yeah. Jakob, what is your take on this? I mean, you did an augmented reality of a garden, creating organisms that are basically existing now in the Kensington Gardens, but only if you look through the phone and you augment this reality. I remember at the preview of this work, I went through this Kensington Gardens with this phone, and then suddenly there was this so beautiful bird, and because they are also doing sounds, they are visible, they are in between the nature, and then I saw this bird and I was really amazed to see it, and then it turned out it's a real parrot that is just living in the Kensington Gardens. So I actually experienced through your piece the nature that I wouldn't have found without it, and there's this parrot colony that is quite interesting, but you installed much more colonies of organisms and connected them, right?
Yes, I think for me, the way I think about immersive media, or technology in general, instead of being this kind of mirror that you're describing, it can kind of be a connection. So like when you look through a binocular, you're looking at something in a different space, and it's there in real time, but you have this mediation between you and this landscape. So this is how I look at technology and its potential to connect to natural environments or species that have been forgotten in natural history, or animals that you normally don't think about. So with the Serpentine Galleries in London, I created an app. So you download the app to your phone, and then your phone uses, like, it has a map of the park. And it takes you to 5 different real locations in the park where there are like these parrots. This is the parakeet. It's an invasive parrot. By one tree, and there are like bats in the park. There are different insects, plants, and roots of these plane trees that can. It's the plane tree. They have them throughout Berlin too. This is kind of a modern tree, planted all over the world during the 1800s because it can store carbon far better than any other trees. So there's so much information and life going on in a landscape that we normally don't think about. And then through AR in London, you go to these different locations, and as you arrive, your phone starts amplifying sounds of species in ways that you normally can't hear them. So the device becomes able, for example, to change the pitch of these parakeet birds, so slow down their sounds, these like calls they make, so that our human ears can then kind of listen to them in a new way or become curious to what they are in the park. So instead of like thinking of technology as something in this project in London that is like mirroring a park or just about technology, I really wanted to do something there where you use technology to make people curious about the park itself. So it becomes a layer on top of the park rather than about the device or about the technology. So this is also something I do a lot in my work. It's to me, it's not about the technology. It's just technology is a great way of collaborating. Like you work with sound artists, field researchers. For this project I did for the Venice Biennale last summer, this was about an extinct bird. So it's a bird that became extinct in the late 80s, but you can listen to it. So I work with Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology, and they have found songs of this bird that is now extinct. So because of technology and archives in like an urban, I made this while I was living in New York, where they have these recordings in the archive. It's like you have this urban infrastructure, a natural history museum, where you can kind of dive into the past. And because of technology, you can actually hear this bird. So this became kind of this uncannily ghost condition that we now live in, where we have these artifacts of things that are gone in nature because of technology. So this installation is kind of a good example of my work, the way I think about, let's say in London, it's technology that takes people outside in a park to kind of find the park, move through a park in a different way than how they normally move and look at that park in new ways. This project is more like inside a physical space. So you walk into this space and there are different sounds of the bird. There's an interview with an ornithologist about his memories of seeing the bird. And then there are these different small computers on the side, and you put on a VR headset and you sink through the ground and you sink into the habitat of this bird that's been virtually recreated, and your breathing starts connecting to this landscape through a little microphone in the headset, and increasingly all this like archive material gains new life by your presence inside the headset. And after like 15 minutes, you kind of go through this animistic ritual. You take it off and you're kind of back into the physical space. So it's almost like a travel through time. But all the virtual material in these projects is all that I do is always based on like an interview with a field biologist about his perspective on the landscape, or like actual like archival materials from collections or recordings that we make in different landscapes. So for me, it's this way of creating this like this pot and mix together different perspectives, different stories of species across time, and make that kind of like provoke some kind of new imagination for people too. What is this new condition that we live in? And just make them curious to think about that. So, yeah.
So it's for you, the possibility in your art is more something of expand our perception of things that are there, and we can see with your art. So like opening the perception.
Yes, I think there are different kind of dimensions to it.
Yeah, clear.
And one is like an overlooked natural history. That's something I work with a lot. A forgotten story about a landscape that people don't think about, and bring that forth through technology, and then allowing people to sense things in nature that we cannot otherwise sense just kind of with a naked body. But I always try to do it in a way where I also emphasize kind of imagination.
You also work with microbiological landscapes?
Yes. What I'm actually working on more and more now is going to landscapes with collaborators. So now my new projects I'm working on now takes place in a landscape with the technologies and working through that landscape. And then through that process of learning, of moving through a landscape, the final artwork will kind of somehow become its final form, like by sound recording, by 3D scanning different elements and so on, in an organic process where technology often has this kind of top-down design, where people design it in one way and then they kind of outsource it or something and then produce it. So I'm trying to now to increasingly make an organic model where the technology and the artwork is made in a landscape with people, and we don't really know the final outcome fully until that process has been active. So it's kind of a living process in the landscape. That's how I'm thinking now. So you
can also help us to understand and see the coronavirus?
I mean, yes, you could look at molecular level, you can look at virus levels. This bird story actually became extinct because of avian malaria. So it's like in the 1800s, this bird used to live on the Alakai Plateau near Hawaii. In the 1800s, there was a horse on a trading ship that stopped by this island. And on the horse was a mosquito. And there was no mosquito on this island. So in the 1800s, the mosquito enters the island. And 200 years later, in one swoop, multiple species become extinct because the mosquito has climbed up to this plateau. So 200 years apart, no one could predict how human travel could suddenly have a viral effect. So that's why I also include this project and its images here, because this is what everybody's experiencing now. We think we can control so much and predict the future, but really nature is so complex that it's way beyond. So I kind of want to reintroduce this story too and use this perspective with technology where I don't know what the final outcome is before the process is started.
What I find totally interesting is how when we recreate nature through technology with the means that you just presented, then we start to understand nature much better. And probably it's not possible to understand something without being able to create it to the, ultimately. So if you recreated, another example is Studio Drift with the, with the franchise freedom work that we are also partnering with Molly and with Pace and with Superblue. To make it fly. So this is like this giant swarm of 600 Intel drones that were programmed by Studio Drift to swarm in the same algorithm that birds are swarming usually. And when they started to do this work and they applied the algorithm they took out of the ornithological literature to this drones, they wouldn't really swarm like birds. They would look at them and they would just repeat the same, movement over and over. So they found out that the algorithm was wrong. And now they changed the algorithm because they also found out what was missing. This was the parameters of the environment that usually make the birds really changing their courses. And now the ornithologists are asking the artist to tell them what is the true algorithm. And this is how art and the creative process can bring us to a better understanding of nature. Hannes, how was it in your case with Random International when you created the rain room? I mean, the rain room is so convincing because the rain looks and feels like rain. Yeah. How was your process to be able to recreate something that is so vital for us? That's actually. Well,
does it though? For us, in the end, what we've created with that machine has very little to do, or surprisingly little to do with rain. We really tried. It's really hard to simulate, really hard, and it's all its randomness and so on. So it's for us, it's always more surprising how easy it is to fool people into thinking it is this or that, and that's what I believe is happening in the rain room. It's got very little to do with it, but it sort of completes your expectation somehow. It serves that of what rain is and feels like. It doesn't smell like it. It doesn't look like it. You don't get wet. It's got nothing to do with it really, but it's triggering something. It's sort of. And I think that for us is the real juicy bit, is where people want to believe something that's where it becomes extremely interesting, because it becomes ambiguous, and I think it's part of this precognitive Stockholm syndrome. You really fall in love with that, what you experience every day on the screen, where you can't stop. It's the same for immersive. I've thought about this a little bit before before today. I think that is what draws people in, what makes that experience pretty intense, and it's at the same time it's a wide field for all sorts of different directions to take, and they're really interesting. Simulation of nature, or the sort of the dissonance between an expected and an actual experience, and so on. They're all starting points for something that then becomes or plays out in your personal experience. And I think that's where we ultimately have an interest in our practice anyway, to follow through with those machines or those experiences.
How important is for you the connection, the dialogue that you, because this element of fooling is obviously an element of magic, you know, it's an element that we all know from former times where art and magic was much more connected than maybe we think it is today, but it still is. So how important is this dialogue that you create with the immersed guest of your experience?
That's a good question, because I still don't know. It's immersion is only one bit, I think, of why we're doing this. I think that it's the most complicated, the most complex thing to achieve. I think making something immersive often kills off other interesting bits in an experience. And I think that the dialogue you want to create, or we want to create, is only to complete the proposition to the viewer. I think that's where I think an initiative like Superblue is really important, because it decouples that from. Usually these experiences can be or are extremely complex to build, to create, and you usually need somebody who then tells you how to do it, either technically or in terms of content, to complete them or to offer them. And it's I think we're only starting now to see models where you can offer these experiences in a way where you can start that dialogue and then leave it at that, because that's what you want to do, I think, as an artist anyway. You want to leave it at that. You don't want to impose or tell. And I think artists have always their hidden, or many have their hidden agenda or their own agenda. And I think that's an important component, and especially in larger scale immersive works, that's not so easy to transport from conception to actual reality. And then once you open that dialogue, that is important, but only as an opener, and then you step back.
I mean, I find it quite interesting that, you know, we are all coming from a world that was full of churches, right, of other temples. And these temples were actually meant as big immersive experiences. They had rituals. They had something that was giving us an experience leading to mental stability sometimes to, you know, something that feels like home, something that is giving us a kind of, you know, understanding of truth. So this kind of function was spread out in our society, and then it was reduced. It was very much reduced to very postmodern rooms without any ornamentic. And now through the immersive experience, especially with technology, we have a kind of new temple of experience. And I wanted to ask Sean Diani, you are the co-founder and executive vice president of Blue Sky, Meow Wolf, and you actually worked for years with immersive installations, mostly made out of trash, what I find quite interesting, in unheated warehouses. And then you co-started Meow Wolf with the first permanent art experience, House of Eternal Return, that became incredibly successful also. As an experience with many many visitors. I don't know how many visitors you are now having per experience, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about what is your dialogue with the visitor and what is for you the the essence of this experience that you're creating.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here digitally with everyone. Thanks for including me. Yeah, I think for Meow Wolf, I mean, a lot of these ideas of kind of the imagination and how we can sort of explore the function of the imagination in our daily lives is a big theme for Meow Wolf. Our work is a lot about giving the participant in the work an element of empowerment and agency to explore without any kind of track or guide or map. And so we sort of put our participants in a feeling initially. You sort of enter into a space that may be quite familiar. At the House of Eternal Return, it is a house, in fact. The family is not currently in the house, but you're able to sort of explore all of the trappings of that family's lives by opening drawers or reading books or fully interacting with all the aspects of the house. And sort of slowly we start to subvert their understanding of what that house is or what a house could be. And in some ways, in very explicit ways. I mean, you can open the refrigerator and pass through the refrigerator, or you can sort of climb through the fireplace. These are sort of playful ways of sort of reorienting somebody to a space. But I think the idea is to take a space that feels accessible and known and sort of flip the code of behavior that we bring to that space in normal social circumstances. And I think that's one of the more sort of powerful aspects of immersive work, is that it can take fairly mundane spaces and it can sort of working on the periphery of experience. It can bring all of these sort of sensory inputs to actually subvert them slightly and make you think about behaving slightly differently. So there's something unexpected, and ultimately the work that we do places the participant in a space of unknown and sort of mystery or perplexity. And I think that sort of opens people up to each other in a way that you might not have when you're walking down the street. So one of the most sort of satisfying aspects of being in the House of Eternal Return is that you see strangers interact with each other in this sort of playful, sort of fantastical environment in ways that they may not just walking down the street, because you've put them in this sort of state of almost perplexity and play that has sort of subverted what feels like a known space into now an unknown space. And then the further you move into the installation, the further you kind of move into the unknown and the imagination. And our work has a storytelling aspect to it, but the storytelling is sort of rooted in world building. And so in such, we're able to sort of bring lots of different artists into that process in a collaboration. And we're able to sort of build out sort of rabbit holes for people to go into through the installations of the other artists' work. The narrative sort of wants to, in some ways, mimic the real world, in the sense that the real world really doesn't have a master narrative that we all can sort of agree on. So having space for other artists to kind of create almost autonomous and random expressions of their work within this larger kind of world building also sort of adds to an element of surprise and delight that I think goes back to, we want the participant to feel agency and to feel empowered in this space that sort of uses the trappings of everyday immersive experience, but subverts them in such a way that makes them think about the possibilities of the imagination and sort of creativity. So yeah, and I think our work really began out of a need. So the story of Meow Wolf comes from, we started in 2008, just as a totally informal art collective in New Mexico, with no plan. It was really just a group of artists who were really, it was more about building community and trying to find space where there wasn't space in Santa Fe for emerging artists. And so we literally we pooled our resources and rented a space. And so this was a sort of post-studio practice in a way of trying to come together collectively to have the resources we needed to get our work done. And it was through that process of coming together and pooling resources that we sort of organically discovered the process of building immersive installation. And the reason for that was because immersive installation and world building provided the best sort of medium for us to include as many artists as possible in that work. And that sort of, again, fed the sort of aesthetic, which became this sort of maximalist world building aesthetic as a tool for building community and for providing sort of alternative space for artists to do their work.
So what I find totally interesting, thank you so much, is that what you describe is the process of creating environments with the newest means of technology and also, but rooted in contemporary culture. So this is something that is our ultimate distinction to Disney World, for example, where basically the culture of experience is only fake. We have now seen for the past basically 20 years or 30 years even that we are extremely creative in the digital realm. I would even talk about a brain drain into the digital world, but everything what is architecture and engineering was somehow standing still, yeah. And the experience that is really a physical body experience was not really developed. And these are now the first, I think, movements into developing an experience that can be much bigger than only the room that you go inside. It can even go outside and create landscapes and what is our topic, city spaces. And ultimately, we would come to a contemporary cultural experience that can be part of our everyday life, not only of the exception of the life. Sabine, what is your take on the integration of culture and experience into the daily life, not as an exception in the museum, but as a routine? And do you see that, because if I look into the last work that you presented, this is obviously a work that is playing with a need that people have every day, not only when they go into the museum. We also have what Sean said, what was quite interesting, the need of creating rituals and spaces for people to meet and interact, because we all know the situation that we meet somewhere, but we don't talk because we don't have this, this one trigger point to come together and really to exchange. We need a ritual basically to connect. And how you see this potential to developing?
Yeah, actually, with that piece by Lucy McRae on the opening day, we were asked by someone if that piece can be bought. So people want to have it at home for sure. No, from my perspective as a curator, I'm really interested in, in showcasing exhibitions that are dealing with our contemporaneity and how technology is impacting that, and to create spaces and experience for people to critically reflect what's happening. So we did a show on big data and data mining, for example. We did that show on eco-visionaries that had, and I think the interesting part were works, the one by Markus Meder, but also others that were about the idea to communicate with nature and to use the technology to do that. So to give nature a voice, to give the trees a voice, so that they can sort of speak to us and for us to understand them. So what Donna Haraway is saying, kind of who speaks for the panther, and make kin, not love. So exactly in that realm, that's when we really showcase a critical practice and really try to create an awareness through the exhibitions that we are doing. So the the current one that we have, where you saw the piece by Lucy McRae, which is titled Real Feelings, Emotions and Technology, that is looking again, and it is now really timely because our emotions feel really heightened through the global pandemic we have to live through, to also showcase how we are interacting more and more with technology, AI, effective computing, enabling these systems to read our emotions and, reflect some empathy. But of course, it's not empathy; it's kind of pattern recognition systems. So all these ethical questions are quite important for me, and I see that reflected in the work by many artists who are trying to focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a very important point, that we have this incredible, push in technology. But if we leave the technology uncurated, so if it's just about the technology, it's just about the engineering, we do a real big progress, but then we end up scrolling through Instagram to get the adrenaline kick of a like, or maybe to see, a body that we would like to, meet. But then we are, basically scrolling forward, and technology is starting to use our brains instead of us using and creating the technology in the direction that you are talking about. So I find it quite fascinating that we have this incredible, amount of investments into technology, but we have only a very small amount of artists that are really dealing with the way how we can use the technology in a philosophically founded way, where we can explain why we're doing something that is not just for money and just for profit. So I think that's an extremely valid point.
And I think that's also why Ryoichi Ikeda, that you mentioned early on, and in 2014 we opened our venue with a solo show by Ryoichi. Why he's so successful? Because he makes us aware of these datascapes, kind of like, experiencing this invisible world that is, there's no longer this duality of offline and online. There's the Parisi, the philosopher, who says it's on life, because wherever we are always connected with the digital sphere.
So it's perhaps we have every day we have immersive experiences. When I'm in a shopping mall, everything is thought through. The music is there, the light is there, everything is set and sane. So we can't say it's just an art. So it's perhaps a question: can art? So a question to the round, perhaps: can art, immersive art, teach us not just to immerse, to dive in? Can it also teach us to surface, to get out of these places?
Yes, I think so. But I think also what wasn't mentioned yet, I think, is also related to the theme of the talk, like liquid experiences. And there's also an element of how you work together, how you create, and with what model. So with Meow Wolf, for example, I'm very fascinated by that, because it's in New Mexico, and there are a lot of creators and artists, maybe not so much in the art world per se, but there's still creative people living there. And by creating this type of space, it's an experimental, or it's a space to experience something where in the urban space where you can go, but it's also a way of bringing together. That's kind of a liquid component to technology and media, and it's that you can enter it through multiple accesses. So it's also a new way of thinking creatively and together with people to create actual experiences and spaces, but also just as a way of living, in Santa Fe, you can have a performer, a writer, someone in music, and they all go together to create these type of spaces. And this is, for my own work, I work in similar ways, just with a natural historian, a field biology, a sound artist, to create these experiences. So it's also a way of really collaborating and living that these technologies can offer beyond the experience itself as well. There's this whole background to it, and how literally how are you making things with other people.
I don't know about art teaching us something, or using it to teach, but I think for us it's a predominantly experimental process that can certainly prototype certain situations of feelings, or you can use it to prototype that. I think that's a lot of the things we work on is out of, I think, an inability to imagine how it feels to, I don't know, encounter a real physical algorithm, for example, like the stuff which we may or may not feel in 20, 30 X years' time. But then you start building it. And I think ultimately, if there's one thing, maybe not as a teaching tool or something, but there is certainly the potential to create some sort of literacy, almost like an instinctive literacy, and that's one thing we think is desperately needed at the moment in like complete inability to decipher what certain technological developments mean on a broad societal level. And I think that broad societal level starts at a very personal, emotional, and instinctive and level and experience. And I think that's where you can really start to offer certain experiences or prototypical experiences, which may be successful or not, or boring or not, or immersive or not, but that you can prototype, you can experiment. And I think that's where this sort of the removal of any intention is really valuable. You just try and see if it works, and then if there is a potential to create literacy, data literacy, I think instinctive literacy, because that's where we are so fooled often in our instinctive reaction to something. It's usually bollocks. It hurts us. The stuff that we've learned for millions of years is really dangerous. Now our instinctive reaction isn't what's needed in these brave new integrated on live worlds. It's fatal often. And I think creating these prototypical experimental experiences is something that can contribute to that, I think.
So an example that is actually going in the same direction is what Egil Sørbjensen, the artist that we will see soon with his installation on this wall. When the dawn is breaking, we will see the flying water. That is a part of our commission program, and it will be visible on this wall. And it's an extremely poetic work. It's the projection of water that actually looks like water. And we were actually talking because his girlfriend has boys in the same age like me, and they are all playing Fortnite. Yeah. And now he analyzed this Fortnite to me from the perspective, or with the eyes of an artist. And what he said, and what I found extremely interesting, is that Fortnite has an extremely beautiful color scheme. So if you look into Fortnite, you have basically this kind of, sunset situation permanently. And this is a poetic experience that we are really lacking in the real world, because the real world, we build it in a way that poetry was actually excluded to a certain extent. And now I have the feeling that with these liquid experiences, we are able to recreate a poetic moment that is that is really immersive, and that can bring us into a mood that we know from nature, but we experience it here through technology. And I know that TeamLab, actually, looking back into Japanese history, is taking out of the history forms and figures and and colors and sounds that are creating actually these poetic moments, and actually also taking it out from nature directly, like with the slime mold project, Takashi, that you presented us, and that is incredibly, it's incredibly strong, because if you take an algorithm out of nature and you let the natural algorithm creating a technical environment, then this technical environment has a much higher, you can somehow relate to it through your body and not through your mind. And this is an interesting experience. Maybe you can say something about this form of installation, Takashi?
Which project? So,
the slime mold.
Oh, that one is it's a bit.
Okay, then not the slime mold.
Things, but I can explain it to something else. I don't know. It's at least for us, it's most important things is like what is word. That is like in our questions, and it's a research, and it's what is in art. It's like, and at the same time in the team labs is like we are a group of it's a scientist too, and the scientist is also it's quite much it's like try to recognize a word. What is a word? And it's a what we wanted to explain is the science and its art is we love it so much, and we have very much desire to know about what is art and it's what is humans, and it's what is world for the human beings. That is like in our motivations to create something, and it's everyday things. And it's if I said it's what is science and it's what is an art, and the boss is try to understand the world, but it's a science is try to make it like in a higher resolutions. I mean it's like sometimes humans it's not super smart. It's we can not understand the world, or it's hold the world in same times. It's for example like we need to try to like divide it, and it's making it a much more it's a smaller and smaller, and it's try to understand, and that is happen is what is happening in this world today. Like for example like it's if you want to understand what it's a forest, it's you need to it's divided to the forest to the it's a trees, and it's what is a trees, and it's divided to the trees to the forest, and it's what is a tree, and it's we try to explain of it like it's a cells, and like what is the cells, and it's going to be like atoms, and it's like make it's much more smaller and smaller and smaller, and try to make divide it and try to understand and explain it. But it's it's that is what I said. It's try to make it the resolutions much higher. That is science. But in the same time, there is another ways. It's try to understand what is word. It's even if it's divided to the word, it's much more smaller. You cannot understand what it's in a whole word. And it's small part is one part of this word, and it's in the same times you need to understand, and it's at least we want to understand the word, and it's like we are like everybody knows like we human beings, or it's this world is like a continuous life, and it's we are just one part of this world, but it's we cannot understand it's from it's somethings somehow, and it's the art is something it's for us try to understand the world by like more personal emotion part, because it's like in a group, or it's like in a human groups, it's we can it's moved by its logic, because it's a logic is people can understand and they use it. So that's the reason why it's if there is a very strong logic, we believe it's people gonna it's follow that logic. But it's human beings. It's by the personal people. It's we are not making an action from this logic. That's the reason why it's today's everybody wears it's a different clothes. It's like I wear it's this black one, and it's like yellows, or it's like green colors. It's if we are it's a completely it's like logical creatures. Definitely, it's we are living on in 1984. Like like when we accept of this mass product, it's we should use its best fabric and its best designs. That is a logic. But it's somehow it's we have emotions, and we wear it's some different clothes, because it's we feel this is beautiful, and this is it's cool, and it's we believe it's like beauties, or it's some kind of cool, or that kind of things that we cannot explain by words is going to decide of the, our personal activities. And the group of these human beings is going to make it, big, like the waves of the, something. And all our project is try to, like reduce of the boundaries of the, dividings of the world. That is, like core part of this, our activities of the art, like borderless, or it's, like some project. It's Mikurai said it's now we cannot show it yet, but it's like using a let's try mode or whatever. It's that is there completely. It's not logical, but it's we need to be there inside because it's we human beings understand the world. It's not only eyes and it's brains, and it's much more like in the physical bodies. And that's the reason why we team labs actually try to bring the people to be inside of this artworks with physical bodies. And it's going to be something that's affected our mind. That is, and if we don't know, it's, like it's going to be like right answer or not. And it's even our output is going to be art or not, we don't know. After 20, 30 years later, each person of people, it's changed their actions, and it's made a big waves. And if it became its new logic of this world, maybe it's going to be art, but we don't know. And we just try to create something. It's weird things using of its technology and the digitals, just only for the tools and the material. That is like what we believed it's beauties because of its continuous life, and it's really one part with its life. That is beautiful. That is we wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Takashi. This was super interesting. Actually, I don't know if you know what he's describing, but Team Lab Borderless is a 10,000 square meter experience that you are basically sucked in and you don't know what is happening to you. And this kind of experience is to reach this, what Takashi described, like the unity of nature, to be able to recreate it. This kind of experience is extremely complex. Molly, you and Sabine, you are both basically responsible to realize this kind of dreams of artists, and it's an incredibly complex process. Even the hanging of paintings is complex, and putting them together with sculptures is complex. But then to create experiences that are, intersected, interconnected, that need a real operations infrastructure and financing infrastructure. Molly, can you give us some insights how the machine room of this world is looking like, and what will be the future of this, because already the situation that is current is requesting much more complexity than we're used from before, but this is also developing in a much more complex future.
Absolutely. First of all, I just wanted to say how interesting the conversation has been, and there's a couple of things that I really picked up on, and it was something I think both Hannes and Takashi were saying, which is really about like the use of technology, not so much to recreate the basis of nature, but recreate our reactions. And I think that's what Hannes was talking about with the rain room. It's, we think it makes us feel like rain. It's triggering our brain to think about rain. And, I think that's what we're thinking about at Superblue, is that we're bringing, and it kind of ties with all these conversations, we're bringing people together. And I think that, the greatest experiences that you have in life are always ones that you have, or memories are ones that you have with other people. And, and I think that what these exhibitions are doing is, a fantastic Sai Twombly exhibition, of who I'm a huge fan. It's something that when you go to the museum, you'd like to be alone. You don't want anyone else there. You want to have the whole space to yourself. But if you go to a team lab exhibition, you need the other people there. They're part of the exhibition. And I think this makes a really big difference. And so, it's a little bit obviously what you're doing with Thermo as well. It's about kind of engaging people's brains and bodies and not tricking them, kind of finding new ways to engage them. And, when you're looking at creating an art experience like this, it really is about bringing people back together again and creating experiences where they interact with each other, that, they lean forward into the art, they become part of it. And, this is really exciting. In order to set up Superblue, we obviously needed funding, but, we're looking at a lot of things that, come outside of, and I'm sure, Suzanne, you've thought about this as well, but, they come outside of a traditional gallery hang. So, we're thinking about things about, how many people can get through the space, how they're going to, how the tickets are going to sell, how many people can go into one exhibition and then how many people can go into the next. Is that going to create a bottleneck? How we can create an experience in these centers that feels different from another museum, that feels like from the moment you arrive, you are engaged into this whole kind of participatory event, whether it's, in the programming, which we're really excited about at the moment, and how we can create a program that makes people feel like they're really engaged in it, that's different, that, whether in the restaurant it becomes an artwork, whether you go into, Hannah knows what I'm talking about, when you go into the bathroom, it becomes part of the artwork. And so, we're thinking about a lot of those things, but also thinking about how, we can create this model that supports the artist, that, obviously supports the business itself, how, we can engage people to run the business and, open up the kind of those opportunities to, people who maybe traditionally wouldn't be able to access the art world. So we're really excited about, the democratization of all aspects, whether it's the, the people who create the art to the people who work in the space as well. And obviously very much the audiences. And, we're looking at how we can expand the venture into many places around the world, how we can travel the art from place to place. And also now thinking about how, how we create our kind of digital aspect of this, and how we combine the virtual and the real, because I think that's such a huge conversation now, not just living online, but how these two spaces interact within our brain. And I think that's very much something that we're going to be thinking about more and more in the future.
Yeah, thank you. Because you mentioned some points that are really important here, and I think also that are highly political. Because if we are not letting the artists, the real contemporary artists, creating this intersection between digital, virtual, and real physical experience, then we leave it, as already said, to the corporates, to the to the Fortnites, to the Pokemon Go's, where actually our children and ourselves become completely disconnected from our bodies, because they don't need our body to function. They only need our brain to get this adrenaline kick, and then they get their money, right? So the question is this democratization, to put business models into the culture sector that will allow culture, real contemporary culture, to expand, and real artists, not only nameless artists hired by big corporates to create this kind of sensual experience, but real artists to produce something that also has an ethical dimension to it. I think this is a highly political question. Now to Sean, Meow Wolf, what is your take on this, and how you are able to combine the economic basis of this extremely resource-intensive experience with the, obviously, in your case, idealistic goals?
Yeah, it's a very good and very important question, and something that honestly we are experimenting with. And I think the Superblue initiative is so exciting to hear about, to see. To see the gallery world sort of embracing this model. I think it really does offer an opportunity to sort of democratize the art experience, and that's something that Meow Wolf has been excited about for years. I think that we formed as a benefit corporation, so we formed with a triple bottom line approach to our business, and we really frame the business in the context of a social impact art project. That's how we talk about it with our board, with our investors, and with everyone who works with us, our employees and artists. I think this is one way that we can look at doing this. I don't know that it's a perfect way, but it essentially operates on the level of accounting, frankly. It looks at how are we accounting for our impact on the world from a social, environmental, and financial standpoint. So it's the triple bottom line approach. I think this is something that I hope to see sort of more of our sort of capitalist system look at. I think it's an important way to do it. I feel like giving agency to artists is a really important aspect of it. And it's again, I commend Superblue for their work on thinking about gain sharing for artists and how artists participate. When you do projects like this, they are, by their nature, there are large scale collaborations that can take a lot of capital up front to get them created. The idea of selling 10,000 tickets as opposed to a single sale of $10,000, right? This is what it all hinges on, and I think that there's an incredible opportunity then to build, hopefully, a positive kind of exchange, place of exchange, marketplace there that is essentially fueled by the people participating in the artwork, and goes to support the artists as well. So I think this is something that I hope many businesses will start to sort of experiment with, and I hope that we will have a sort of culture of collaboration in that regard as well, because I think we need to look at capitalism, and we need to look at how exchange occurs in the art world, and now in whether it's real or not, the experience economy, whatever we sort of define that as. And I think one way to do that is to really look at this as an art project. I mean, these businesses are art projects, so they have the kind of ability to question the frameworks and structures that they're operating in. And I think that's the way Meow Wolf is looking at it, and that's what we're sort of experimenting with.
Thank you so much. So I would like to stay a bit in this sensible question. So I would like to ask, what could be an important liquid experience, and what could be a superflu immersive experience? And also, we're here in Berlin. We had the Nazi time, and the Nazis had a political aesthetic, which was extremely immersive also. They tried to get the people, and we also had the socialistic area with setting the people in the streets, all this Inszenierungen, and all this, and we are in the town of Bertolt Brecht, who works all the time about aesthetic of distance to provoke a new form of reflection. So what is really also the dangerous in immersive experience and immersive art? That's my question to the round. Sabine?
Well, the dangers, on the one hand, for example, when we think of virtual reality, there was always this claim that virtual reality is an empathy machine. And I don't think so, because it's you have this immersive experience, and then you take off the headset, and maybe then you feel sad for example, if you are taken to a refugee camp, but then it's like switching the channel, and then you listen to something else, and it's not. I mean, that's really the big question: how can change be facilitated? How can really be an awareness being created that make people change their behavior? So I would say that is a danger. And on the other hand, maybe another issue to think about is the loss of complexity, because maybe not all our senses are, addressed by media technologies. So it's also we lose something, and we have Cecil here, who knows all about smells and how powerful smells can be. So I think that would be my 2 cents on that topic.
Yeah, I think the certainly meaningful for us, I can only talk for us, is analog. There's a huge focus on the value of analog. I think we're completely in danger of decoupling our attention from or paying attention to worlds decoupled from our analog experience and from our analog reality, and so making things that are truly sensually experiential is quite a good start for a meaningful experience, I think. And then I think where things become where they go from fluent and relevant to superfluous is, I think, in the it's in I think it's when it becomes too intense or too I'm not no. It's okay. when it's an overload, I think that's when what you see a lot, I think, these days, when it's just piling on to something that we already have, I think, and that's it's an almost dichotomy to cut away. I think probably the best immersive experiences are silence these days, without anything, and I think that's worth thinking about as well in relation to this piling on that needs to be highly, or should be highly moderated some way.
Yeah, for us, it's it's basically the daily experience that our guests, and we have up to 15,000 per day in our facilities. They're very often going into our thermal bath. They go through the locker room, they change, they take the bathrobe, and then they go to the sunbed, and then they sleep. They're just sleeping, and they're paying us for sleeping on the sunbed. But they need this kind of space to be in the vacation mode, to just switch off this incredible staccato. So one of the things that is, I think, a USP for us that became a little bit blurred now, unfortunately, is that people are not taking their phones. Yeah. So alone the fact that you can leave your phone in the locker room and then you are basically phoneless, you are offline. This is already a huge. It's a huge advantage actually, because you have this space for yourself. But this shows also how important it can be to create a certain space with a certain rule, so we can follow the rule. It can be a rule of interaction. It can be a rule of non-interaction. But it's very important to have this kind of frameworks, because without these frameworks, we are lost. We are very social organisms, and we are all the time in a kind of, social connectivity. And when people don't, when there's no path, from ourselves, from our own, motivation, it's very difficult to and it's also a question that connects to the system of education that we are having right now. Everybody that is a parent here was affected by COVID-19 through not bringing the children into schools. And many of the parents here that I talked with, and also in our case, it was partly a very good experience, because the school is probably not the experience that is really delivering the maximum of education, with the maximum of empathy, with the maximum of social behavior and a positive programming. And the thing that connects all this is an ethical dimension, because actually in our daily life, we in the postmodern society, we not only said that God is taught and there is no church, there is no God, but we also stopped to ask the question if something is really ethical. And this is something that comes back right now. And actually, in my opinion, this will be a very big question: who will actually have the have the influence in society? Will this be the art and culture that is producing a contemporary manifestation of, that is also always a manifestation of ethical questions, or is it the anonymous apparatus of corporates that are actually having a very legitimate goal, but it's only profit. Yeah. So the intersection. This is why I wanted actually from you, Sabine, to when you listened to Superblue and you listened to Meow Wolf and Team Lab. This is basically free, actually big corporates that are able to bring culture into our a democratized culture into our realm. How you see the intersection between public institutions like you are representing and this new form of private initiatives?
Yeah, good question. I wanted to to add to what Molly said already, because that's actually also what we as a public institution try to do, to facilitate new works. So the production of new works is important for us, and for our current show we did quite many, because often media artists that we work with, they don't have a gallery, they don't have that financial background. So it's also important that the public institutions can provide that. And we are a public institution, mainly funded through government money, but we are also in need for, we do fundraising like all cultural institutions. So that's one thing, and I think that with these new initiatives coming up, I think there will be a diversification of the cultural sector. And I think the only thing that you have this new field opening up, but I think you have to see that there's also a practice that is maybe more niche, more critique, and I think the one does not, should not. How do you say, success should not be a measure for things that can be produced. I think that would be my, what I think is important.
Yes, absolutely. Can somebody bring the microphone, please? That's okay. That's perfect. So this is success shouldn't be the measure for things that will be produced. I think this is an extremely important sentence that we should grave into the stone. And now, Lucia.
Sorry, the quickest of comment, because I think Heiko's question was really brilliant, which was this danger of a thing, and being the fact that I work so much with mysticism, and that we know that there has been in history moments in which mysticism has been co-opted by the most evil. I have to ask myself this question all the time, and so I think it's brilliant. And I just wanted to put my foot a little bit longer on, Sabine, the point you made about empathy. Because it's not only that you switch, the risk, not the de facto effect, but the risk is not only that you switch the channel and then forget about it. The risk is that whilst you are doing the empathy replacing machine, you are not doing something else. And so this question about when are we citizens and when are we experiencing, when do we forget to be citizens because we're spending a lot of time experiencing, and obviously being so much more I obviously know Jakob's work more than the rest, and I apologize for this, but one of the things that I really love about your work is that technology is a step along a process of environmental citizenship. And I, if I may, just would love to hear that, because you've said it already, but I would love to hear that sort of, how can it be a step on the process and not that the medium becomes, as it were, the end point of the conversation?
That's a very good question, and I encourage everybody to ask questions right now, because this is exactly the right moment. And now, Jakob.
Yeah, I think for me, it's never really about the technology. It's about this, if to kind of put it on the fingertip, in my mental sensing, or evoking a curiosity. So that's my kind of end goal, and technology is just a tool for the way I work. We heard earlier, an experience can also be really meaningful and completely analog. I work very digitally, but it's only because it allows you to, let's say, record a bird, listen to it in a new way. You can look at things and particles in ways that you couldn't before. So you can give this whole vision of environments in new ways, and just kind of do a little gesture in a pretty big field of technology, of environmental work, and you do your kind of little thing, pushing towards a sense of curiosity, making people kind of wonder, oh, I never thought about this animal before. Like in Hyde Park in London, when we did the Deep Listener, one of the species I worked on was blue damselflies. So another person working at Serpentines, that's been there for 2 years, she told me that she didn't know these existed. And she's been walking along this trail for 2 years, and then she tries this app, and all of a sudden she's noticing the life of blue damselflies, which is one of the oldest living evolutionary species on the planet, like 350 million years, but they are close to becoming extinct. Now they're bouncing back a little bit. So this little app in a park was never about the technology. It was about the damselfly. And then someone tells me like, oh wow, now I'm paying attention to this damselfly. So for my work, it's this little tool that you can use, and it has certain capabilities that I find very applicable. Like, yeah, you can sense things a new way. You can have like international collaborations. During the quarantine, I've been working with my collaborators in different countries, and we've been working on this virtual landscape together, and we are synchronized when we work. So it's like very seamless and a fluid way of working. But I mean, the way we create it is different, let's say, from the artwork itself. But because there's an organic process inside of it, I hope that the final new artwork feels more organic than before, than like a project I would create before. So for me, it's never about the technology, but I think there are different directions shaping. So like, you know, some artists or practitioners, it might very much be about technology and AI and like new technological systems. For me, it's about taking kind of charge of that system in a way, and especially these projects that I do that are extremely heavy virtual, but to create them, I'm very bodily in a landscape. The reason I do it so virtually is the reason like the same you mentioned with Fortnite. There are like a few tech corporations that are just they're these giants, and they're starting to battle. And they really, I mean, most of you probably have a phone, so X amount of hours in the day, their posture, their expression, their communication, emotions with other people is defined by that device. That device is produced by some massive place. So by creating, for example, Serpentines, like a project with an app, like we work with Google, and like that's why you can have the map, because you use, you know, Google satellite technology looking at you moving through a park. Like you take this kind of big data brutal system and you make it about a damselfly in the park. So it's like that's a complete reversion of scale. And I think it's really, like with the danger before, I think it's very dangerous not to operate in that field, because it is like present and it is very real, and it's taking more and more control on like what you experience, the stories you hear about the world, all these things. This is a new medium, and it's really vastly exploding, and it's controlled by very few small entities, and they're getting smaller and smaller. I mean, they're getting bigger and bigger, but fewer and fewer. So it's important to have this communication and to form like institutions or large businesses or something that can communicate at that scale. So for me as an artist and working with Serpentines, for example, it's like they're an institution. A technology company knows what an institution is, but to a lot of technology companies, an artist is this guy you hire to make a 3D bird and make it fly, while the director of a project is telling, make me the bird fly from there to there and make it blue. Like this kind of communication is enforcing how. I mean, that's why I think it's really like this thing with how it's also changes how you work and create things, because I think it's really important to enter that field at a scale that's beyond the artist. And this is where I see the role of the institutions or business, whatever it is. That's for me, that's the perspective, because this is a language that another big technology company can understand. And I also know that more of these companies want to have these conversations. So it's not like just this big evil either. It's also like culture. It's sharing, it's communication, introduction, and starting like building new fields. And I think they exist in multiple different avenues and accesses, like, you know, physical immersive experiences, then there's the virtual ones, then there's the people helping support different types of them. But these new fields need to evolve somehow, like to counter that.
So totally the agency that is necessary for artists, so they don't just become a small part in a big, you know, like an unidentifiable part in a big machinery. That's, I think, something that is extremely crucial, and also is one of the biggest problems of architecture. You know, what we created a world where children want to become architects after school, and then they are, you know, starting full of idealism, and then they are cut it down to be just a Erfüllungsgehilfe in German, yeah, to be just somebody that is basically a machine that has to produce results that are completely disconnected from any any form of their own authorship. And without authorship, we are creating a world without authorship. And this is exactly what I think is a huge fight that is to be fought. I mean, the Berlin main station, where Meinhard von Gerkan projected it, and then the Deutsche Bahn wouldn't realize it according to his intellectual property, his plans, is a very good example for a fight between, you know, the investor, the company, the organizational structure that is not respecting the creative will of an artist, of an architect, that is just a symptom of a huge plague. Of a plague that is the city created by corporates, you know, where at the end the transport routes for logistic companies are more important than our own body that is basically marginalized and is not anymore participating in the, you know, in the free flow of the city, in the liquid experience, but it's basically marginalized by cars and automotive companies and engineers that are basically not designing holistically, but designing, yeah. So that's a huge topic, I think, that you are raising. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for this great talk. I'm really inspired, and I also do felt art experiences or installations. So I would love to hear, if you create your visions, what was your hardest point and your most enjoyable point? Because I know there are moments when you are you have to go through this. You just have 2 arms and 2 legs, and you cannot. I don't know. I mean, there are points when it gets really difficult, and then yeah. So maybe it would be beautiful to hear about your working practice.
Maybe Hannes can answer
each of you.
this question, so we balance the.
I think that definitely the most enjoyable thing is to see something coming into life with real people, with real audiences, and that 1 person or 1,000 people, it doesn't matter. It's like when that pans out and is not dull. That's a really incredible experience. What I increasingly enjoy is also the collaboration with other art forms, such as choreography and music. I think that's something we're doing a lot. I'm cheekily picking up on the point that was made earlier. I think this differentiation between citizen and consumer, I think it's not mutually exclusive. I think there is a point where you can co-create and as a member of the audience, and that's sort of baked into some of the I think most appealing or widely appealing art. So look at JR, like where you have a huge element of co-creation, which is amazing and makes people both citizens and deeply immersed consumers of art, and others do that too. And I think Jeppe Hein, for example, does that incredibly well. And I think there is an opportunity in these larger, if we manage to roll out these works on a international scale, there is a sort of opportunity to casually break with some of the sort of last century models of generating or building these models, in that we can make them, I think, especially of cultural colonialism, where you just come in and you just impose something that was developed in London or Berlin or Stockholm, and you just plug it into anywhere in the world, and you expect that to be successful. And I think there's a huge opportunity to make things more locally relevant without losing the artistic origin where it comes from, which I think there's always a friction between that. Why would you expect people to look at that stuff when it's not from there? But I think there is a definitive opportunity to break with that and to introduce other ways of participation locally, which are authentic, and probably, if they're to be successful, they're probably quite simple. And that's something we're incredibly interested in in this whole conversation of rolling out these things, to not make them only one project or one artwork, but to apply systemic thinking in some way and try certain things out.
Yeah, and maybe
wait a second.
Oh,
Just
sorry.
because we're running out of time, so I have to cut you off at this moment, unfortunately, because we still have to go through one exercise that is extremely important for us. As you know, our company is basically looking into the city of the future that will be a human city, that will be a city where we use technology for us and not vice versa way. And now from the perspective of your work and from the perspective of the title of this talk, Liquid Experience, what would be a sentence that you would like to add into the manifesto of such a city to make it maybe more liquid, maybe more experienceable, maybe more human? We start with you, Jakob.
You need to remain intuitive and imaginative in the city.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Sabine.
You stay connected.
Very good. Perfect. Takashi.
Sorry, one more time. It's a question, please.
One sentence for the manifesto of a city that will have the kind of liquid experience that you would like to see. It's not a sentence yet, right?
Like a skip. It's
It's
the next
2
phrase.
o'clock or in JP.
No, it's me.
Yes.
It's so hard to say it in just one word, but it's a.
Can be one sentence.
Yes. Feeling the meaning of life. That's going to be like,
That's very good. That's really very, very good. Feeling the meaning of life. Hannes.
I don't know. Trust the artist. Trust your artist.
This is this is boys. Yeah, bravo. Bravo, bravo. Molly. Molly, we cannot hear you. And we can not hear neither you nor the person on the picture. That's very good. And Sean?
I would say keep asking questions.
Perfect. So we have taken down all these quotes and we will write them down and we will have them stored. Thank you very much for participating in the panel. Thank you, Heiko, for co-moderating. Big round of applause for the panelists. And thank you very much for our viewers here and in the internet.